U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has held a rare and frank exchange with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on the sidelines of the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Kuala Lumpur. The discussion centered on the Ukraine conflict comes just hours after a deadly Russian missile barrage on Kyiv. Rubio said he shared ideas and comments and expressed disappointment over the lack of Russian flexibility. Rubio emphasized Washington's continued engagement in the ASEAN region and acknowledged that progress on Ukraine remains elusive. He also confirmed the Trump administration is in talks with the U.S. Senate over a potential new sanctions bill. Furthermore, the U.S. Secretary of State has stated that U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will participate in the ongoing proximity talks between the sides in Doha, though he doesn't specify when. This high-stakes meeting unfolds amid growing frustration in Washington and heightened tensions between the U.S. and Russia. Now we are joined by Tim Kirby. He's a Russia journalist joining us live from Moscow. Thank you, Tim, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How significant is this rare face-to-face exchange between Rubio and Lavrov for the Ukraine conflict? Do you think could this frank dialogue lead to any real progress?
No, because there's essentially no real way to come to some sort of agreement. This is sort of a zero-sum game. Russia views the war in Ukraine or special military operation or whatever terminology you use for it as an existential crisis. Existential, excuse me, my pronunciation's lacking. I was sick the other day. But when your existence is on the line, you can't really negotiate, and vice versa. For the powers that be in Kiev, at least for their foreseeable future, they see their project Ukraine as completely under threat, and their existence is on the line as well. So there's really no way to find some sort of compromise option. Furthermore, Mr. Rubio has even said in the past, as has J.D. Vance, that essentially, the war in Ukraine has kind of become like a proxy war. But then the United States also wants to be like a neutral sort of negotiator within this process. And it's like the United States is participating in it, but it's not participating in it. It's really vague. It's kind of a soup of contradictory ideas. And therefore, I think absolutely nothing will come of any talks.
And Tim, how do Russia's fresh missile attacks on Kyiv impact the diplomatic space for talks like this?
If the Russians launched very, very few strikes, or they launched even more strikes than they've been firing, it changes nothing. Again, this is a zero-sum game, and the Russians just want Kiev to capitulate, fully capitulate, unconditional surrender. That's what they want. And until that happens, they're going to keep going.
And now looking at ASEAN, Tim, what message does this barrage send to ASEAN nations watching this conflict from the sidelines?
To which nations?
ASEAN nations.
Oh, well, it certainly shows an example that when we include the recent attacks on Iran and the pumping up of war on the island of Taiwan against the Chinese, the entire sort of global south is definitely still under threat. We may be on the road to the multipolar world, but we're not quite there yet. And unfortunately, some historical inertia is still behind the military-industrial complex in the West. And that, as a very good political analyst, Mark Slobodka, said, you either hang together or you hang separately. And that's kind of the situation that the global south finds itself in. So we need to continue integration of the global south, partnership, and trying to ride out the storm of the end of the monopolar world.
And do you think that could the U.S. use its presence in the region to rally more countries to pressure Russia?
The West, from the beginning of the war, and even before that, since even during the Cold War, has tried to rally the world against Russia, or at least then the Soviet Union, right? So that process of rallying people to go against Russia is a sort of continuous process, right? And just recently, I saw an article that said the supposed coalition of the willing, as in certain NATO countries that would be willing to, at least theoretically, maybe enter the war on the side of Ukraine, have all said they're not going to send troops. So that's essentially dead. They're a coalition of the willing in name only because they're not really willing to fight in a direct sense. So, no, Washington or London or Brussels or whoever you want to blame has failed to unite the world against Russia. In fact, the exact opposite has happened, and that's why Russia has been able to weather the sanctions and why there's been definite major economic growth in the entire global south, whereas the economic growth in the West, especially the European Union, has ground to less than 1%, closing towards zero or maybe even negative growth.
And Tim, now from your point of view and where you are located at in Moscow, how united is the Trump administration and the Senate when it comes to taking tougher action against Russia?
In the Senate, I don't think that they're very united at all. I mean, Lindsey Graham is prepared this bill to organize, 500% sanctions on all the countries that help Russia. More or less, that's the gist of it, right? These bills tend to be huge, but, that if they actually were to enforce that universally, that could really kill the economy of the United States. And Trump himself has been very skeptical of that bill. And Trump has also, as have many politicians, they're kind of all over the place. Like I mentioned earlier in this interview, we've had some American politicians say, the U.S. is involved in a proxy war against Russia. Why are we doing this? We've had Trump kind of wanting to end the war, saying he knows how to end the war. He doesn't know how to end the war. And then you get some politicians like Lindsey Graham or that freak governor from, I forget what state, I think Louisiana, who want to put America on some sort of apocalyptic altar to destroy Russia. So the spread within supposedly conservative politicians and their views is not only very broad, but chaotic and ever-changing and often contradictory. So I wouldn't really put too much meaning or really seriously consider it as some sort of sign, because it's just pure messaging chaos.
And Tim, do you say so because from US's point of view, is there a risk involved that more sanctions towards Russia could backfire on US markets and its interests?
Well, again, if Lindsey Graham has his way and there's a 500% tariff put on all countries that help Russia in some way get through the sanctions. Again, the bill is much more dynamic and there's a lot of details, but long story short, that's what it's about. Then that's maybe the death of the United States. If the United States could very quickly reindustrialize, really quickly sort of go back in time and break up some of the farming monopolies that existed in the United States, then actually that could work to the America's benefit, because it would essentially do what has happened to Russia because of the sanctions. It would get rid of all the competition from the outside, and Russia and America are both big enough that they can survive, in theory, without a lot of imports or support from the outside. It's just the problem is that over the past few decades, the United States has had a major policy, especially starting with Clinton, a policy of deindustrialization. The entire West chose to deindustrialize itself and try to play the role of the capital city of a globalist world order. Well, that's falling apart, and being a capital city of the globe is not very good when you involve yourself in international conflicts or when you want to develop your own territory. So, again, it depends. If Trump could reindustrialize the United States, big tariffs could be a huge boon and really help out America. But in America that currently doesn't have that much industrialization and is very dependent for stability on a lot of imports, 500% tariffs could be quite a solid blow to the American economy.
Thank you very much, Tim Kirby.